Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends spin a wheel every day in the month of October. It chooses the horror movie and they discuss it. Today we're talking about the 1996 film Scream, which was directed by Wes Craven. I'm your co-host Alec.
I'm Eric, and with us again is Joe Testa. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Thanks a lot, guys. Happy spooky season.
Yeah. Really quick, just want to, again, I've been doing this with every single one that we've redone. This was actually our second original episode. The microphones were not up to our quality. We're re-recording it now. And honestly, there's not one episode I wanted to record more because we have Joe, who knows everything about Scream. So I'm so excited to hear how it is.
That's a lot to live up to, but I'm glad we're actually talking about Scream. I feel like in our I Know What You Did Last Summer chat, I kept trying to steer the conversation towards Scream.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we could just talk about Scream this time.
Well, that movie, that came out the following year after this, and it was written by the same guy. It was Kevin Williamson, right, who did both.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I just got to say this right off the bat, I think this is, even if it's not your favorite horror film of all time or anybody's, it is one of the most important horror films of all time, just for what it did to the genre. And I think I Know What You Did Last Summer is a nice little continuation of what Kevin Williamson started with this film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got into it a little bit in our I Know What You Did Last Summer episode, but you know, I was seeing a lot of horror movies before Scream. It's not like they weren't being made, but they didn't seem to have much pop culture impact. You know, it just seemed like me and a couple of my friends and whoever was reading Fangoria at the time was even interested in horror movies. And yeah, Scream changed all of that.
And you saw this in theaters, right?
I saw this 5 times in theaters.
Oh,
Good
wow.
Lord.
Wow.
Yes, and I dragged my poor grandfather, who I mention often in this show, because I think I was 14 when this came out, so it was still difficult going to see R-rated movies with my friends. So I think this was actually the 4th Wes Craven movie that I dragged my grandfather to.
Can I guess the ones you saw with your grandpa?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, I'm going to guess because of the time. I'm going to say People Under the Stairs.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
And he hated it, by the way.
Okay, that's a weird one. And then I'm going to guess New Nightmare.
Absolutely. And he liked that, and I loved that one. I'm a huge Freddy fan.
Shit, I can't guess the third one.
Scream is 3, right? Scream is 3.
Scream is 4. So there was one in between there.
Shit,
yep.
Okay.
If I'm remembering the timeline correctly.
Yeah, I can't remember any other early 90s Wes Craven movies.
You want me to tell you?
I do, yeah.
It was the Eddie Murphy classic Vampire in Brooklyn.
What? I didn't know Wes Craven directed that.
He loved that one.
You know, I don't even remember. Like, I barely remember that movie, let alone our reaction to it. I haven't seen it since.
Wow, I didn't know he directed that one. Damn, what's your grandpa's name, too? I want to know.
His name's Joe as well.
Grandpa Joe. Perfect. So Grandpa Joe, who's been dragged to every horror movie from like the mid 80s to like whenever you turned 18. So that's awesome. So what did he think of Scream of all 4 of those?
He liked Scream a lot, actually. And I actually remember him commenting on the chemistry between David Arquette and Courtney Cox and actually like predicting their romance. And they ended up getting married after this movie.
I know. And it's crazy.
And they've been divorced, but my grandfather was, he got a sense of those vibes.
Well, when Scream 5 comes out, who knows? Maybe they could get remarried again. I mean, J-Lo and Ben Affleck doing it. Maybe these guys can come back. Eric, I mean, this is probably the first time you've seen it since last year, right?
Yeah, definitely. Once a year is good, I think. Once a year is on par. Like, you know, you don't need to watch it more than that. No, it made me reflect on 1996. Like, it's just wild, strange time. One thing I read about that made me laugh my ass off was that Wes Craven apparently wanted to film at the Santa Rosa City School District. I don't know if you guys know about this, but in the credits, when they roll, Wes Craven put a dig in there and he wrote, "No thanks whatsoever to the Santa Rosa City School District Governing Board," because they were scheduled to film there. They were good to go. And then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? No, not today. And like screwed up the whole schedule, made a nightmare for Wes Craven to the point where in the credits drop that, like, no thanks whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like an opposite thanks. I love it.
that was actually the first thing I remember hearing about this movie was that, there's a new Wes Craven movie and the school they were intending to shoot at wasn't going to let them shoot there. And at the time, it was still called Scary Movie. It wasn't
Mm,
called Scream.
Right. And you
yeah.
guys just said also like how much this kind of changed the game for horror movies because it broke. I wouldn't say it broke a fourth wall, but it broke like a weird parody wall
Mhm.
that I don't think Scary Movie would exist if it wasn't for Scream. And I know Scary Movie has like a ton of different horror movie spoofs, and it's the same production company, Miramax Dimensions or whatever. But I would say Craven and Williamson should get some bonus check for just kicking off that billion-dollar franchise.
Mm.
Mhm.
Well, not even just this, because I think we talked about this last time, Eric, but it is, to me, it's like the definitive parody film that's not like directly trying to be a parody film, like date movie or superhero movie or scary movie or any of those very specific parodies. This
Yeah.
one's a clever meta parody almost of a genre. I don't know.
Yeah, but it
Yeah.
definitely sparked that Scary Movie. It's like, oh, look at this. Look at how
Oh,
they did.
yeah.
We could. It's the whole movie. Scary Movie's pretty much Scream. The main guy is Ghostface,
Right.
and then and the last thing I want to say too before we get into the movie more is, did you grow up in the '90s and go trick or treating if you didn't have a Ghostface mask, especially the Ghostface mask that had the heart pump blood thing
Hmm.
that explodes and gets all of your carpet in your bedroom, and your mom gets really mad at you? You didn't have a childhood unless you had that.
Yeah, Joe, you were probably prime age for, well, I don't know, you're probably a little old for trick or treating by then, I guess.
Yeah, but I did rush out and get a Ghostface mask after this movie came out,
See,
for sure.
see, I told you. I told you.
And funny enough, I had seen these masks before. It's not like something that was made specially for this movie. This was a mask that you saw at all the cheap stores around Halloween, and it's a mask I think they just found while they were location scouting. They didn't know exactly what kind of mask they wanted to use. There was nothing specific in the script. They found this, and they just ended up going with it.
Wow, I didn't know that. I thought it was made for the
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
Yeah, damn. I mean, yeah, and then I guess Scary Movie, that's probably made it a lot easier for them to use it because it wasn't made for Scream. So it's like, oh, it's kind of like public domain mask.
Yeah, whatever like mom and pop shop came up with this mask, I think made a lot of money.
I would hope so.
And the
uh,
mask is based off the famous painting Scream.
Right.
oh,
That's
okay.
that's who they owe money, whoever that estate is.
Huh. Well, this movie has one of probably the most iconic openings of any horror film almost ever, where obviously we all know it, but Drew Barrymore, like a top billed actress, getting murdered right in the beginning. I mean, you, Joe, seeing that in theaters, I
Mhm.
can't really think of a lot of movies that Drew Barrymore was in around that time. I mean, obviously I know E.T., but then in the late 90s, like her career exploded. But were you very surprised when that happened the first time? And was she a huge actress to you?
Yeah, I don't know if she was a huge actress, but she was definitely someone I knew, and I did think she was the star of this movie going into the
Hmm.
theater.
Huh.
Absolutely.
Dude, look
Wow.
at the poster. Look at the key art. It's straight up her front and center. She's the biggest person on the poster. How much did it cost to get Barrymore? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, I know originally she was going to play Sydney, and I'm not sure what her reasons were for turning that down, but I think it worked out really well. I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial, and I don't mean it as an insult because obviously I love this movie and I actually have a lot of fondness for the whole series. But to me, it never gets better than this opening scene.
The best part's the beginning, right?
It's the best.
Yeah.
This movie never gets better, more iconic, more intense than this scene.
Well, I'm just imagining like a 14-year-old Joe who loves horror movies, and then you're basically seeing like the ode to horror films, even in this opening scene. They're just like talking about how shitty all the other Nightmares on Elm Street are, and you're like, oh my God, he directed this. And then they're talking about Jason, and it's just like, I would be
I mean,
freaking out.
like I said, Freddy, Jason, these things seem to be forgotten to pop culture at the time, unless you were a kid like me reading Fangoria.
Yeah.
But yeah, to hear these names being said and for people to be talking about them the way you talk about movies with your friends, it was really surreal. And let me tell you, when it comes down to the horror trivia, being able to save your life, when he's quizzing her and she has to get these questions right to live. I mean, that was pretty thrilling. Like all this useless knowledge that I've,
Yeah, he'd
you
be he'd
know,
be on the phone with you for a while. It's like, okay, what was the third person in Friday the 13th?
well, funny you say that though. Just watching this movie, I think under the pressure of just watching it, I don't think I would have gotten that Friday the 13th question right.
Y-
When he tricks her with the Jason question,
oh yeah.
I think
She's
I
also
think
under a lot of pressure.
exactly. But even sitting in the theater at the time, I think my first instinct was just to say Jason.
Yeah.
I would just love to see Ghostface ask you, like, what's your favorite scary movie? And you're like, well, that's a complicated question. And like really throw him off. And like, let's go around the room real quick. Mine is Halloween, 1978. What's your favorite scary movie, Joe?
Are we really doing this?
See, this is what I say. Just answer the question. Don't make it a thing. Just what's your favorite scary
um,
movie? Come on.
y- I'll make it real simple and say The Exorcist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alec.
I was gonna say The Exorcist too. That or The Shining. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool. Just that's all I want to get that out there. But I can see Ghostface having a rough time with you and like
That was torture.
getting
I
that
just
out of you.
I wanted to monologue about, oh well,
No, no, that's not how this
the
works. Now it's
Universal era, and
now it's in the now it's in the questions. Okay, who played the Wolfman? Like you go into that. Like yeah.
if I could just say, when you talked about how she mentions Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven actually wanted to take that line out of the movie because he directed the first Nightmare on Elm Street. He didn't want audiences to think that he was knocking the other movies. But then Kevin Williamson, I think, reminded him that he directed the seventh Nightmare, so it was okay. He left it.
Yeah, but it was also, I think I found this out like semi recently that Bob Shea didn't pay Wes Craven for a lot of the movies, and he paid him like years later. So maybe that was kind of like a little like dig. But
Yeah,
you said he didn't want that line?
he didn't. There
Oh,
was
okay.
bad blood, but I think before New Nightmare came out, they kind of settled all that.
Oh, it was before that. Okay. Speaking of New Nightmare, a lot of people, and I got to agree, like they say that that was almost like a teeing up the bat or whatever for this movie for Scream. That was like a sort of like a dip into the meta realm of horror.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely think these things were on Craven's mind, and I think they were just kind of lingering in the 90s in general. I think maybe this movie gets a little too much credit as a pioneer of kind of meta horror, or pop culture references. It was already happening a lot in the 90s. There was a forgotten movie called Brain Scan, where
Hmm.
Edward Furlong plays a huge horror fan. Like, even in the Jason movies, Jason Lives, Jason Goes to Hell, there was a lot of pop culture references and kind of looking back at the genre, poking fun at the genre. So it was happening, and it was happening a lot in the 90s. Even, if you watch Quentin Tarantino movies, they were full of pop culture references, but Scream perfected it in a way.
I guess when I look at this movie, I want to pick it apart because everybody's like saying it's the biggest masterpiece and it changed the horror genre and all this stuff. But I brought this up with Eric last time and it still sticks with me where it's like
I
I
know you're gonna say
can't
this.
I can't justify Stu and Billy. They're them doing this. I understand like okay, Sydney's mom cheated with Billy's dad, which forced Billy's mom to leave the town. I get that. Like it hurt his family dynamic. He's a product of divorce now. That's horrible. But that makes him enough to murder his girlfriend's mother, then murder her the following year and convince Stu to do this all as they're about to graduate and go to college and be like, hey, let's move on with our lives.
So, are you looking for a motive?
I
I think they address this. I mean,
Yeah.
did Hannibal Lecter have one?
No, I mean, no. They're just crazy. They're crazy.
He definitely like the Matthew Lillard thing though, the Stu, like he brainwashes him by making him watch all these horror movies, right? Or like what is it that like he gets Stu involved? He's like, Stu, we're gonna kill people. Come on, like be fun.
Yeah, be
Like what?
fun.
Where's that? Like what is
Right.
like? He's like, no, we're gonna do like horror movies, like, and he just makes him watch them all day. Like I don't know where that he pulled him into that. There's no personal thing with Stu. You're right, Alec.
There is an interesting prequel to be made. Like, there are a lot of questions about how this all went down. And I'm actually not the first person to bring this up, but there also is a kind of a gay subtext that certain circles have pointed out, that Billy sort of has a motive, but Stu really doesn't. And they're killing their girlfriends. And
Yeah.
there are times in the movie where it seems like Stu might be infatuated with Billy. Now, this is just fan theories, but since we're talking about it, I'm going to throw that one out there.
Yeah. Dude, that would make the movie, I feel like, so much better because it would really make sense. I mean, this is jumping a lot of new ground. You've got two killers, it's very meta, but if it's also the killers are gay for each other and that's what's kind of driving this and they're going to like run away
Yeah.
together.
You said if I did this, we would be together. Like if I helped you, we would be, and then they kill each other. I don't know. That's a good
Yeah.
twist spin to it. I could see that being thrown out there as an idea.
It's
Like
a fun subtext, but I'm perfectly fine with it being left to your imagination why exactly they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and it might just be Matthew Lillard being Matthew Lillard, but like Stu's a psychopath. I mean, like he can't keep his tongue in his mouth. Every line is like, ah! Like he's just like he's crazy. So maybe
I thought it was
he
the performance of the century, honestly. Like if you want my opinion, I thought he was fantastic. I'm feeling woozy here, man. You cut me too deep. So good.
Speaking of that scene, I wanted to bring up when this movie came out on home video, I actually had it on Laserdisc.
Ooh.
And for you kids listening at home, Laserdisc was a home video format before DVDs. It was a huge disc the size of a record, and he played movies on it. But
like a vinyl DVD.
exactly,
Right?
that's exactly
nuts.
right. So Scream was released in Wes Craven's director's cut on Laserdisc, and then never again for some reason.
Whoa.
And there were some differences, really minor, and the differences only added up to like a minute of footage, but pretty much every death scene was shaved down a little bit. And I think the most graphic scenes were when Billy and Stu are stabbing each other at the end.
Mm.
And in the beginning, Casey's boyfriend, you see his guts spill out in that scene. It's pretty gruesome. But yeah, only available on Laserdisc as far as I know. It's never gotten any other kind of release.
While you were just talking about that, I Googled eBay Laserdisc Scream, $50. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That could go up in a couple of years. Who knows?
I'm sure you could find the footage on YouTube.
That's for quitters, Joe.
There
You
you
buy
go.
the Laserdisc and you do it the right way properly.
Oh, I still have my Laserdisc. I just don't have a player, unfortunately. Also on the Laserdisc, this was the first time I ever heard an audio commentary, and it was Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, and listening to the writer and the director kind of walk you through the creative process on this movie that I love. It was just awesome.
I thought it'd just be Wes Craven, like Santa Rosa School District, never ever shoot there. Like, like he just goes off for like 40 minutes. Like, all right, can we talk about something else? Like
2.5 hours.
Like I don't know.
Funny.
I'm just being silly.
See that, Joe? These are the exact stories we love to hear from you. Like that's, I didn't even know, director's cut even existed. That's amazing. There's two moments in this movie that are, I think, beyond meta, and I want to know if you guys noticed them. Obviously, the first one with Wes Craven dressed up as Freddy Krueger and then being called Freddy or Fred or whatever. He's like, "Not you, Freddy." That's obviously, but the one is where Jamie Kennedy's character, Randy, I think, is watching Halloween, and Ghostface is coming up behind him as he's calling Laurie Strode Jamie. It's like he's almost saying it about himself. You guys know what scene I'm talking about?
In the screen, yeah. That's
So
that's a cool shot.
Dude, it's like he's watching Jamie Lee Curtis calling her Jamie, but he's actually Jamie, and he's like, "Turn around, Jamie," as Ghostface is coming up behind him. Like, this is blowing my mind. Like,
Yeah.
That's a lot, yeah. That's a little bit too trippy right there.
I want to say, as much as this movie kind of pokes fun at horror movies, I feel like it's always respectful to horror movies. Like, it never feels smug, which I really appreciate. Like there's the scene where Sydney is kind of knocking old horror movies, how, yeah, the girl is stupid and always runs up the stairs.
Yeah.
Well, Sydney finds herself running up the stairs later in the movie.
2 seconds later, she's on the phone with Ghostface and then knocks on the door, goes to the door, and then he's behind her in the closet, and then she runs right up the stairs. So
Yeah,
you're right. It's almost like people criticize it until you're in the situation.
exactly.
So good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I was gonna say the way Ghostface moves too is just so like crazy. Just like runs at you like like knife up in the air, and like I'm coming to get you, and you just like kick him in the stomach, and he falls down the stairs. It's never anything like slow like half the other guys. I mean, Freddy Krueger was always like, I'm coming to get you with his arms flailing, but like
So much different than like Jason or Michael Myers.
Totally, and like Ghostface is he's like a little bit smaller, I guess, like easier
Mhm.
to hit. I don't know, like he gets hit a lot, Ghostface, you
Mhm.
know. So it's kind of funny.
Could I go back to the opening scene for a moment?
Oh yeah.
Because that scene really hit different, a little bit different this time. Like, especially when the parents get involved. When you have the parents not only discovering the body, but listening to Casey being murdered on the other end of the phone. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like
It's violent.
a that's a level of brutality I feel like Craven kind of explored in his early movies, like Last House on the Left. I don't know, I just felt it was pretty bold, and I'm glad he did it. I don't mean
Hmm.
for that to sound like, bloodthirsty. I don't think it was handled gratuitous. I feel like it gave the scene stakes and consequence. And I think they know not to push it. I think the rest of the movie and the rest of the series never matches that level of brutality. And if it did, this movie might not be as popular as it is. But
That's a good point, dude. I'm thinking right now too when you're bringing all that up about the brutality that Wes Craven definitely had within him, and we've seen it in other movies. The fact that they make that line about like, can you set up for PG-13? That's him saying like, I got to make a box office movie, so I got to go like R-rated. I can't go NC-17. So I got to
yeah.
settle. You got to settle, Billy. You got to settle.
I've listened to a lot of great interviews with Wes Craven over the years. He was a great ambassador for horror movies and a really smart guy. And he talked about how like he wanted the violence in his movies to have consequence, and violence
Hmm.
should be ugly. And oftentimes with the censors, they wanted to water it down. And he felt that that was even more irresponsible, making violence look less ugly in a way.
Yeah, because it's not obviously it won't be appealing if you're actually seeing the damage that it's causing.
Yeah, and he thought that was important.
Eric and I talked to this in the past, but we were thinking like I think there's only two directors that could have made this movie, and Wes Craven obviously, but the other person that I thought would be John Carpenter, just
Mhm.
with his history obviously of the horror genre and understanding it so well. But could you think of any other the director that could have taken this and done it as gracefully as Wes Craven?
Well, I will say that I'm surprised he got this job. I like this movie just screams to me like no pun intended, like a hot
Hey, hit the screen button.
just like a hot young director. I feel like Miramax would have attached someone up and coming. I actually remember hearing Robert Rodriguez was
Mm.
attached. He had From Dusk Till Dawn that same year, another good horror movie from the time. But I'm just so glad Wes Craven got to do it. Like he had been around since the 70s, just battling, critics and censors and movie studios. And I'm just glad someone from the old guard got this kind of vindication in a way.
It's kind of like
But
a victory lap. It's like a victory lap
absolutely,
movie. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. But as far as someone else who could have done it, yeah, I mean, Carpenter's Scream, that sign me up for that. I'd love to
Yeah.
see it.
Ron
But
Howard back with
yeah.
his buddy Henry Winkler. Ron Howard, no, I'm kidding. That'd be the worst choice. It's like he doesn't do horror. No.
Sometimes I think Craven doesn't get enough credit for this movie because, the script is so witty, the dialogue is so sharp. I think Kevin Williamson sometimes gets the lion's share of the credit, but
Mm.
I think in another director's hands, this movie could have easily gotten too comedic or kind of crossed that line into scary movie territory. And I think the director is very responsible for the tone, and the tone is really important with this movie.
I think that's 100% right, and when you were saying, like, a young, hot, up-and-coming director, I think they got that with Kevin Williamson as the writer,
Hmm.
so t you're right, though, to have, Wes Craven exactly, like, passing down the old guard, keeping it in control,
It's like the best of both worlds.
yeah, it really is. Well, I wanna talk about the sequels a little bit and the upcoming one in the series a little bit, but is there anything you guys wanted to say about this film just before we move on a little bit?
I just wanted to mention a fond memory I have of this movie winning Best Picture at the MTV Movie Awards when that
Oh.
thing seemed to matter.
Yeah.
But I remember, since we're on Wes Craven, he gave a really nice, earnest speech, and really just kind of thanked the MTV generation for giving credit to these movies, you know, because yeah, I mean, before Scream, like I said, there were a lot of horror movies, some good ones, some bad ones, not many that were moving the needle. But I don't think horror movies were ever more disrespected than they were in the early 90s. And after Scream, obviously slasher movies kind of petered out eventually, but I still think horror movies never really went away in the same way. And now they're practically, besides superhero movies, the only thing keeping the lights on. So yeah, I mean, Scream is as important as everyone says it is.
Yeah, it's like it made horror cool again. Or
Mhm.
like made it like mainstream for the first time, where like it was a cool to like take your girlfriend to a date to it or see it with a group
Yeah.
of people. Yeah.
And
Mm.
one last thing, this was in the early days of the internet. And I do remember, like anything that's successful, there was a little backlash. I feel like coming from maybe the older horror fans, you know, they felt that this was like kind of WB horror, you know. But you know, I never really felt that way. I've never been snobby about the things that I like, and you know, to me it felt like vindication. Like, yes, everyone gets it, this stuff is fun, you know. And like Eric said, it was an awesome victory lap for Wes Craven, who had been doing this
Yeah,
for 30 years.
is a big part of the 90s culture too. I got a couple quick hits, Alec. I know we're running short on time. Henry Winkler, just want to bring him up. I remember seeing this for the first time in theaters. I did not know there was two killers at the end. I thought Henry Winkler, the principal, was going to be the killer at the end, like a fast-moving Henry Winkler. But there's a scene with the scissors where he's like waving at the kids. I think he's like, "I'm so sick of these damn kids." Like I thought he'd like be like, "I wanted all of you to die," and especially at the party scene, I thought he was going to show up and like, but they kill him and he's dead. And he's like, "Oh well, there goes that." Lee Schreiber's in this movie briefly. He
Yeah.
plays
Cotton Weary.
Continuity.
yeah,
Yeah.
Cotton Weary. And then my favorite part about this movie, and I've said this before, Alec, if your high school had a serial killer on the loose, what's the best idea? Where would you want to be? A party. An awesome party. And that's what these kids do. And it's funny. It's funny as hell. I love that idea. Wes Craven ran with that, did it perfectly. Because normally you would do that, it'd be like, this is the stupidest thing ever. But he just like nailed it. He's like, these kids are just like, F it. Like, let's hang out. Let's party. What are they going to do? If we're all together, let's hang out. Like, the killer can come to us. Like, love that scene.
Well, I love
The rest of the movie from there is awesome.
there's a curfew going on too, and
I know.
and like Dewey, who's a cop, is at the party, just like, hey, it's like, don't worry about it,
Oh
like
my
enjoy
God.
your beer.
Worst cop ever. And also, his cop outfit is from Party City. Like, that is the worst cop uniform ever. Made me laugh. And I love that scene where he's like, I'm 24 to Courtney
Yeah.
Cox. I'm like, what? Well, yeah, but no, but that's like funny when she's like, oh, you look like you're fresh out of the academy. He's like, I'm 24. Like, he says it like a little kid. One
Yeah.
of my favorite lines delivered in the movie by far.
Really quick before anything, Eric, just do me a quick favor.
What do you want?
Type into Google, type in Henry Winkler. Just type it in.
Henry Winkler?
Winkler.
What? I said Wrinkler.
You've been saying Wrinkler
Oh,
for like
I've been saying Wrinkler. I always thought it was with the R.
no, it's
Where did that
Winkler.
come from?
Dude,
Dude, it's Berenstein Bears to me, man. It's Berenstein Bears.
It's so funny because we've brought up Henry Winkler many times throughout the
I
year
say,
in the podcast.
why am I saying Wrinkler?
You've been saying Wrinkler.
Where is that coming from?
I don't know. Anyways, well, you know what? Let's save the sequel talk for next time. You know, Joe, we'll have you on for Scream 2 when we get to that. But really quick, I do want to just talk about Scream 5 for just a minute, just because we don't know really much about it. I know it's coming out, I think, next year. Do you know much about this one, Joe?
No, not really. And I kind of intentionally stay away from details about upcoming movies that I do want to see. So, yeah, other than I know the director did Ready or Not,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I thought that was a pretty fun movie. It's kind of weird not having Craven anymore. And I know most of the surviving cast is back. So I'm intrigued for sure.
I know. It's just obviously, you know, we can't do anything about Wes Craven, but the fact that they're not bringing Kevin Williamson back, that's what really makes me a little nervous. But
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
yeah, it's two new writers, one called James Vanderbilt and Gary Busick. Yeah, it's coming out in January of next year, so I'm definitely gonna see it. But yeah, I feel like the fourth one was kind of a nice place to end it, so I'm curious to see where they're gonna go.
January
Mhm.
14th. I mean, just I feel like the fourth one was very technology, like cell phone, iPhone driven. This is probably going to be like that on steroids. But I want to say one thing. Look up a Scream 5 fan made poster. It's probably my favorite fan made poster I've seen.
I've
You've
seen
seen
it.
that,
I
right?
know
It's
exactly what you're talking about, and
they
it's
take this
awesome.
the screen mask, right? And it says "Welcome Home, Sydney," and it's like a highway. It's like the Merritt Parkway, and it goes like through the scream mouth. I'll send it to you, Alec, after this, or if you want to Google it really quickly.
Oh, I see it.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome concept, and it looks so sick with the fog and the "Welcome Home, Sydney."
Oh, yeah, it looks like a little, like, tunnel. Yeah, that's awesome.
I know nothing about it, but yeah.
I don't know, maybe we'll cover it in January, who knows?
I just wanted to get your opinion on the twist. I always loved the twist when Billy fakes his death. I thought it worked great when I saw it in theaters, and it still works great. And the movie's really rewarding upon rewatches because you watch Billy and Stu's interactions, and there's a lot of little subtle things that I think work really great, even all these years later. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on why do you think he fakes his death? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
So, you're talking about where, like, he's coming down the stairs and he's holding his gut and he looks like he's bleeding out and he's like, "It's corn syrup." That part?
Or even going back further when Ghostface enters the room and he turns his back and presumably Stu pretends to stab him.
Right.
I have a thing.
Yeah, go for it, Eric.
I mean, he's obsessed with horror movies, him and Stu.
hmm
So they want to live the horror movie twist. That's what I was thinking. But what do you got, Joe or
Yeah.
Alec? What do you got, Alec?
Well, the only thing is, like, was he planning on revealing himself to Sydney, or was he just gonna kill Sydney? Because that would kind of change my whole perspective on it. It was like, if he genuinely didn't really care about Sydney finding out it was him, if it was like, Stu, you pretend to kill me, then just go kill her, then it wouldn't really matter. I'd be like, okay, he just wanted to scare the shit out of her and maybe like make her more vulnerable, but I don't know.
I think the party is the end game. Like, I think this is the big climax that they've been working towards. And if he's going to fake his death, I mean, he has to kill Sydney because, I mean, he has to end it with her that night because if she gets out of the house, if she goes to the cops, she's going to say, I saw Billy die.
Right.
So I mean, obviously, it's just a great twist, from a filmmaking standpoint. Like it's just a great thing to throw at the audience. But when I started putting myself, in Billy and Stu's mind, I'm like, well, why do that now? You have Sydney cornered, you have Stu in the room with the knife. Why don't you just end it now? I mean, it does seem like this is what they've been building towards. And I just kind of went down a rabbit hole thinking that, and maybe it's not too different than what Eric just said. I think maybe Billy, in some weird way, in some meta Wes Craven's New Nightmare way, does know he's in a horror movie
Huh.
because he says that. He essentially says it in the scene before, right before him and Sydney have sex. She's pouring her heart out to him, and
Wow,
all, all he can do is think of Silence of the Lambs in that moment, and he
that's
he
so.
compares her to Jodie Foster.
Dude, you know what
Um,
you just made me think of too? When he goes like, "Can you give me a PG rating or PG
mhm.
13?" We
Yeah,
like, it's like, oh, so he's a movie.
I think
Yeah.
in some almost like Truman Show way, he went off script in his life somewhere and ran into Wes Craven, and he realized I'm the villain in this story.
That's so cool. That's such a cool
Yeah.
way to think of it.
See,
Yeah.
and it also got me thinking about how pushy he is to have sex with Sydney. And obviously, he's a horny teenager, but also he might know that while she's still a virgin, she's
Mm.
untouchable. Like he has to
Oh.
seal the deal if he's going to be able to kill her.
Damn. And it would justify because, like, I think that was one of the criticisms we made earlier was just like, why are they doing this? It doesn't make
Mhm.
sense. But if you are like self-aware that you're like, no, I'm making a horror movie in my life, then yeah, everything's justified. All of his actions.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like this is something Kevin Williamson thought of or if he even was on Wes Craven's mind, but it's just a take that I thought of. I mean, this is the guy that made Wes Craven's New Nightmare, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe something like that was on his mind.
Well, I want to ask you then too, do you think that because there's so many opportunities where they could have killed Sydney? I mean, they really could
Mhm,
have, but then it kind of gets goofy where like
mhm.
they kick him and he falls down and you like, whatever. But there's so many times, why not then?
I think he shows up after they kill Casey. He shows up to try and have sex with her that night, and he's
Hmm.
like, If maybe I could seal the deal with her tonight, then we're gonna get her at her house, or the next time. Like he knows he has to do that in order to complete his masterpiece, And I
Yeah.
think they genuinely do make that attempt, when one of them comes out of the closet and they chase her up to the stairs and Billy gets arrested, and he's probably thinking in his cell, while she's a virgin, I cannot get to her.
Shit. Yeah, dude.
Damn.
That's
Anyway,
Wow, you thought a lot deeper into Scream than I think I have
I
ever even thought
I thought
thought
way too
possible.
much. Let's call a spade a spade. I've thought way too much about this.
Yeah, dude, you saw this 5 times in theaters, so you probably like were just doing laps, like just thinking in your brain. Like that's so cool. That's a great point. I'm never gonna watch this movie the same way again. That's a fantastic point.
And it's cool too because he like indirectly influences so many copycat killers to make sequels out of their real life. I mean, this real story. It's decades of murders because of this guy's crazy fantasy.
Anyway, that's my thought.
Well, Joe, again, thank you so much, dude. I learned so much. I love this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And we have you coming up for The Crow, and we have you coming up for another movie. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head right now.
I think it's Dawn of the Dead.
That's right. Dawn of the Dead and The Crow. So those will be coming up soon.
I know a lot about The Crow, Joe, so I want you to try to hit me with some knowledge that I wouldn't know, and if you blow my mind, I'll never. Yeah.
Well, I'll do my best.
All right. What do you say? Spin the wheel, Eric.
Let's do it. Spinning. The Exorcist.
Perfect. So we have Nick Leone will be returning for covering that one. I know, Joe, that's one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, it's up there, if not at the top.
Yeah, me too, definitely. So, well, thanks again, Joe, and we will see everybody tomorrow with The Exorcist.